This episode is sponsored by the Expert Services Directory. Are you a coach, consultant, speaker, or trainer who wants to sell your services to corporate clients across the UK, but you're booking fewer than 5 qualified sales calls from your lead generation each month? Or finding that all of your inbound inquiries are coming from junior employees in firms who just want to benchmark your pricing rather than actually introduce you to the real decision maker who has the buying power to get you in? And you really want to generate real qualified inbound inquiries from decision makers in organisations around the UK who actually have buying power and want to purchase your services as an external supplier? Well, that is exactly what the Expert Services Directory is for. And if you visit www.expertservicesdirectory.com and sign up now, you can generate qualified corporate leads for 12 whole months by being part of the Expert Services Directory, where we proactively market specialist providers just like you to real decision makers in companies across the UK who are ready to buy from external suppliers. And if you use the code podcast at checkout, all caps, you'll also get a free corporate priorities calendar that you can use to understand exactly what decision makers are prioritizing at each point in the year so that you can create solutions that sell all year round as well. All you have to do is visit www.expertservicesdirectory.com and enter the code podcast, all in capital letters, at the checkout now. Right, let's get back to the episode. Welcome to the Selling to Corporate podcast, where we're going to be challenging your sales beliefs around selling to corporate organizations and help you increase your bottom line profits every single month. I am Jessica Lorimer, your sales expert and guide in this world of selling to corporate companies, skyrocketing your company sales and making the impact that you really want in the world. Now, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show today, please do head over to iTunes and leave us a review. But enjoy this episode, and I am really looking forward to sharing some epic sales wisdom with you. You know, it's going to be a good episode when I've pulled out the sparkling water for it, which is always exciting for me. As somebody who bought one of those, what do you call them? Soda stream things. I'm going to say 8 years ago, I bought one. It has been in the box for the last 8 years and I have not used it. But I really like sparkling water. And today I was like, it's going to be a big episode. I'm going to get it out of the garage. I'm going to prepare my sparkling water. And then, sure enough, I actually couldn't reach it in the garage. So I did not do that. I had to go somewhere and buy sparkling water specifically for this episode, which should show you just how excited I am about it. Perhaps not everybody records their exciting podcast episodes with sparkling water, but if you don't, give it a go. I would thoroughly recommend. So I don't know how everybody else is feeling, but January and February, they've been busy for me so far. I've taken on 4 new corporate clients, working on quite big and complex projects with them, which is really, really exciting. I've enrolled new people into our boardroom, which is the one-to-one experience working with me for a full 12 months, which is very exciting. So that's been awesome. I've delivered 2 in-person events for entrepreneurial clients. I had my planning retreat right at the beginning of January, which was just amazing. And then we had our in-person C-suite day at the end of January, which was absolutely phenomenal. Someone actually sent me an email afterwards and said that they were really grateful for my delivery because they were sure it couldn't have been easy to deliver with so many coaches in the room. And it's actually one of the reasons I'm doing this episode, because working with intelligent people who challenge you is such a joy. Like it's so exciting for me because, don't get me wrong, like I love what I do. I think sales and sales training is just the gift that keeps on giving. I am with people who are curious. I am with people who are highly motivated. I'm with people who are, in a lot of cases, perfectionists, myself included. And being in the room with people who care about something so much that they have questions, that they challenge perceptions, that they are, thinking about rewiring their behavior. That's just really cool. Um, and it also made me think about one of the, I don't know, aha moments that I've had over the last probably 6 months or so. Now, I've obviously been in the sales world and specifically the sales training and consulting world for a long time. 18 years, I'm basically a dinosaur at this point. And for the last 14 years, I've run my own business. I've trained multiple thousands of entrepreneurs around the world. I've trained multiple thousands of professional salespeople around the world, working for some incredibly cool brands and organizations and developing ethical, best practice B2B sales strategy. And do you know what I hear all of the time from new salespeople? So, meaning new people who have moved into professional sales roles, and also from entrepreneurs. So, people like you who've started their own business because they were super passionate about something, because they wanted to make a change, and then have ended up inadvertently becoming the salesperson for their business, because that's how it works. I've noticed there's this issue that's pervasive across both groups. And specifically, it's about not wanting to seem, and I quote, salesy, sleazy, pushy, like I'm hard selling. It's that pervasive undertone of sales is negative. To be a salesperson is a negative thing. And this extreme desire to avoid that like the plague. And I think it's really interesting because I've heard this. I couldn't even tell you how many times over the last 18 years. And I've heard it, like I say, from both groups, professional salespeople, entrepreneurs. I've even heard it when I met Owen. He said to me, he's like, I honestly never would date anyone in sales. And I was like, oh, this is going to be an interesting one for you, my friend. Lots of my friends feel the same way. They couldn't have a career in sales because they don't want to be salesy. And for years and years and years, I focused on this as being not a mindset problem, but something that needs to be reframed because of a mindset that people have around it. And actually, what I've realized, like I say, over the last 6 months, and this just proves that if you're one of my clients, you're listening to this, and I always say to you, sometimes you have to have things repeated 1,000,001 times because that's when it suddenly clicks. This was my moment. Over the last 6 months, I realized it's not a mindset issue at all. It's a communication one. And that is where this episode, this sparkling water spectacular, has come from. And I'm really excited about it because I've noticed that there is this huge communication gap between sales communication and quote unquote normal communication. And it's actually causing problems, not just in how entrepreneurs like yourself are managing your sales processes, but also in quite a lot of other areas of life. Remember last week, last episode when I was talking about the fact that over the next few episodes, I've got these big concepts that I want to talk about. And you should consider them to be multiple parters as episodes. This is what I mean, because this is a big conversation. And over the course of the next 25, 30 minutes or so, I want to give you concrete examples of where your communication is going wrong from a sales perspective. But you might actually think, weirdly, there are other areas in my life that could benefit from this. And if there are, please, please do reach out and let me know. It's funny because I talk a lot on the podcast about just email in. If you got a question you want me to cover on the podcast, email in. If you have a thought about one of the episodes I record, email in. Do you know how many people email in? Very, very few. So, if you get to the end of this episode and you think, actually, do you know what, Jess? I agree vehemently or I disagree vehemently, email me. Let me know. I would love that. So, what do I think is the major problem? And where does this show up and why is it such a problem? Those are the things that we're going to cover together today. And actually, it's really interesting for me because over the last couple of months, I've been talking about the expert services directory on the podcast. And one of the things that we look at in the listing guidance when you sign up to be part of the expert services directory is how you write your listing so that you can actually attract inbound leads and inquiries that are qualified, meaning from decision makers who are interested in your area of specialism and actually hold the budget to pay you, rather than getting a bunch of unqualified inquiries from, junior employees who have no say and are usually just benchmarking, right? So in the listing guidance, I talk a lot about language and a lot about the way that we need to communicate from a sales perspective and a lot about how you need to frame things for your listing so that you get the most qualified leads and inbound inquiries from the directory. But I review every single listing personally. And so I know when somebody has gone through the listing guidance and really looked at what they need to communicate versus when somebody has gone through and really done their best to do a great job, but hasn't really heard the message behind the listing guidance, right? And to be clear, this is not me atting a load of people who have created listings and then had me come back to them and say, I think we should make changes here, here, and here for these reasons. This is me saying that there is this wider problem around the way that we communicate and around the way that I think people assume salespeople are perceived and how salespeople are supposed to act, and how actually we're all communicating with each other in slightly strange ways. So, like I say, we'll dig into the episode. We'll start talking about what the real problem here is, what's caused it, and where it shows up, so that by the end of this episode, you can look at your own communication and think, am I actually making it easy and simple for decision makers to buy from me? Or am I unwittingly making this so much harder than it needs to be? And if you are, obviously, the incentive then is to change that, because otherwise you'll be the definition of that fish that tried to climb a tree and was, judged by Einstein, I think, as it feeling stupid because it was, a fish trying to climb a tree. Side note, I think I've mixed two two metaphors there, or idioms. So I apologize about that, but I'm not going to go back and change it. So let's talk about this communication gap, because I think that for me, this is quite a personal issue. And I don't know, I think there are a lot of people who listen to the podcast who are quite like me. Now, when I was a teenager, I was annoyingly high achieving. Um, and I realise that sounds quite, I don't know, does that sound arrogant to say? Probably. That might just be something from me because I, live in the UK and here we don't brag and things. But as a teenager, I was incredibly high achieving academically, not in terms of sports. I was very bad at that. But my particular passion and my particular zone of genius was English as a subject. I love everything about the English language. And I know that sounds really sad to say, but I know that there'll be people who are listening to this like, oh my God, my favorite thing was science. I just loved how, human biology worked, or I loved how, leaves produced chlorophyll and whatever. So it's fine. We're a safe space. But my particular thing was English. I did lots of English exams ahead of my time. I was younger than other participants, and I would get really, really high marks because I loved everything about it. I loved understanding how language worked. I loved punctuation. Again, the nerd. I I was obsessed with understanding the ways that language techniques and literature combined to create these other worlds that people could go to in the form of fiction and poetry and plays. And I just loved it. Loved the whole thing. Anyway, when I was 14, I was offered the opportunity to do my A-level English exams early because I was such a super nerd. And obviously I said yes, because how great is that? And I was doing this set of essays for a teacher who I really admired. And the reason I admired this teacher was because she'd actually come from industry. So she had worked as a marketing um, consultant for a huge organization. She'd got to a point in her career where she just went, actually, this isn't fulfilling me. And then she decided to go and teach secondary school kids. So not only was she incredibly cool, but she'd actually applied the techniques that she was teaching. And for me, that was just this absolute breath of fresh air. And I really wanted to impress her because she was somebody who knew how to do it. Anyway, we were writing these essays, and I wrote this essay, and it was on a comparison of books. And I, I wrote everything that I knew an examiner would love in these essays. I wrote about connotation and collocation and oxymorons and all of the techniques that I could possibly harness. And I submitted my essay, and I actually thought it was pretty good. Which for me, as somebody who's quite hard on myself, was a big thing. And I got it back, and it had scored the highest mark in our little gifted and talented group. And do you know what? I was over the moon when this teacher read out the marks. And then I got my essay back. And whilst I'd scored the highest mark in the room, she'd actually put on there that it was really boring to read. And my heart honestly sank. I was devastated. I'm not obviously going to say that that was the reason that I didn't go on to become an English teacher, because it wasn't. This is not some secret guilt trip from the early noughties. But it was this really shocking revelation to me because I'd done everything right. I'd done everything right, and I'd done everything to the textbook, and I'd done everything that I was taught was the right thing. And here I was scoring the top mark, and it wasn't good. I just didn't understand. And so, I had a chat with her, and one of the phrases that she used has stuck with me. I'm 36 now, I was 14 at the time. Stuck with me for a very, very long time. And that phrase was, wear your intellectuality subtly. Now, like I say, she was a master with words. And that has just stuck with me for 20 odd years. But I think it's really interesting because I think it's actually the reason that so many entrepreneurs are struggling to sell successfully to corporate clients. Because we kind of have two camps when it comes to entrepreneurs, right? We have the B2C camp where, we're as entrepreneurs trying to sell to individuals or maybe other solo business owners. And in that world, there's this weird marketing thing around being the expert, being credible, sounding clever, where you have to be prescriptive and you have to be seen to be really, really good all of the time. And then you have the other camp, B2B sales. And it's interesting because when I work with companies, and I work with a lot of companies to look at cultures of sales teams, their performance, why somebody is performing spectacularly well and why somebody just isn't. The interesting thing that I notice when we're looking at how to recruit and replicate peak performance in corporate sales teams is we don't want thinkers. We want doers. We want implementers. We want people who are driven. We want people who are ambitious and hungry and have energy and self-motivation. But we don't necessarily want big philosophical thinkers. Because often the issue with big philosophical thinkers, and believe me, I'm aware of who's listening to this, so please stick with me on it, because I'm also a big philosophical thinker. They sit in clever. And it goes right back to what my English teacher told me: wear your intellectuality subtly. And it is really that need and desire to be seen as clever or credible. I think we can substitute those two words relatively interchangeably in the online marketing space, is so problematic in sales. And maybe it is in other areas of life. I don't know. Like, I don't know how other people are, you know, disagreeing with their partner, but obviously every time Owen and I have a disagreement about what temperature the oven needs to be, of course we have, a big long-winded discussion about, I don't know, the seagull and other philosophical, books and concepts. Um, but seriously, it's one of these interesting things. I think that we are being so conditioned by the space that we're in as business owners, and also this endless usage of um, generative AI to improve ourselves, to always be, I don't know, sounding better, more clever, more interesting, then actually we're not. And from a sales perspective, I'm watching it day after day after day ruin sales processes for both professional salespeople and for entrepreneurs like you. And it's really, really challenging to unpick. So, what I want to do is give you a couple of examples, 3 specifically, areas where you might be doing this inadvertently in your sales process and what you need to watch out for. Now, obviously, I can't go through your messaging personally, unless, of course, you decide to join the Expert Services Directory and submit your listing, in which case, obviously, I will be going through it personally anyway to make sure that it is on point. But these 3 scenarios should give you a really good insight into where you might be doing this and what you can actually do to stop it. Okay? So, where do we see this need to be credible and clever? Well, the first place that we see it naturally is in what I would call job titles. Now, I know every entrepreneur is doing this because they run a business, but ultimately, when we are introducing ourselves to others or to organizations, we are talking about what we do. And so that's what I'm using this definition of job title as today. When I introduce what I do to people, I say I'm a sales coach and consultant or a sales trainer or, whatever version of that I prefer on that day or what's relevant to that person. But what I'm seeing is a lot of people agonizing over this in the entrepreneurial world. And they distill it down into words that all in isolation sound good, but together just sound like this amalgamated complex mess where nobody ends up actually understanding what you do. So it's the difference between saying, I'm a sales coach and saying, I am a mindful communications expert who focuses on the craft of sales and communication around it. And genuinely, I'm seeing people say this as job titles. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, you in sales, you in comms, you in marketing, like what? you know, I'm seeing people, and this isn't me picking on anything. But the examples I see, people are talking about, I'm a mindful, sustainable leadership consultant. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what that is. And you don't have to justify to me what your job title is or what you do. I don't mind. I just want to understand, right? Because when we don't understand something, instead of asking questions, because again, we have to bear in mind, we're telling other people this. When we don't understand something these days, it's kind of frowned upon to ask questions because you then look like the idiot because you're asking questions about something that other person is reeling off in a semi-confident way. So you think, oh, is there something wrong with me? Am I not understanding something? Somebody genuinely the other day introduced them to me as, and I quote, a revolutionary audio expert. Now, at the time, I was like, does that mean that you're in radio? Because I had no idea. And they looked at me like I was some kind of, I don't know, just somebody who shouldn't have been let out of school. And they're like, obviously, I'm a sound engineer. And I was like, oh, okay, great. That sounds really interesting. Actually, I'm really interested in sound as it goes. I have a podcast and, you know, I like noise. So it's really getting difficult now to understand what people do. And when we're putting decision makers into that space where they're having to try and identify what you actually do from the 3 or 4 words that you're using that are, like I say, great in isolation, but don't actually make it clear. And they're having to navigate that alongside the fatigue that they have from doing their day-to-day job. It's just not possible. Like they're not even bothering to try and decipher it. They're not even bothering to ask questions because they're like, I can't be bothered to do it. And I can't be bothered to feel like an idiot when I say, what is that though? And you can tell, like that's absolutely what they want to ask, but they don't know how to do it politely. And therein lies another communication gap, right? The position that we put other people in when they don't understand something. And that is a big sales problem. Because when we put other people into that position where they don't understand something, A, it's impossible for them to buy anything, and B, they feel stupid. And when people feel stupid, they don't buy, right? Decision makers don't think, oh, do you know what we really want is an expert who makes us all feel like absolute tosh about what we do and what level of understanding we have about a very complex, potentially area of specialism. No, they want to buy from the person who makes it interesting and accessible. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I was with a corporate client and I am training a couple of new people for them. And these new people, they are graduates. So they have gone to university, both done actually really good degrees. Now, I say really good degrees like I think they're bad degrees. I honestly, unless you are going to be a drama teacher or really want to understand the psychology of theatre, film, television, my degree, not hugely useful. All right. Not saying pointless, but I am saying, would I advocate that anybody who doesn't want to be an actor or be able to act like a tree or be able to, analyze Coronation Street or whatever soap you're into from a psychological standpoint, should you do it? Obviously not. Um, but they've both done intelligent degrees. And one of the conversations that we ended up having, because obviously they went away and one of the tasks that they're looking at the moment is lead generation. And so they went away and they created lead generation that was using these words in isolation that all sounded good. But when they were reading them out to themselves, to me, to others, they didn't make sense. And that's the second area that this problematic communication error comes in, is in our lead generation messaging, right? Because these are two intelligent individuals. They have graduated with these real degrees and have done hard work to achieve the grades that they got. The trouble is, though, university and education, really as a whole, it makes us look for the right answer. It asks us to be clever in the same way that doing my English exams early all those years ago was asking me to be clever, to give the right answer, the right sentence, the right word. But it didn't really teach me, and I didn't really learn until I was an adult, the power of thinking critically. And that's a problem because in our lead generation messaging, it's becoming so difficult to understand what people do, what they're trying to have conversations about, why it would be beneficial to have conversations with them. Because what they're doing is putting something very basic into ChatGPT. Like, I don't know what people would even put into AI to get a lead generation message, but I imagine it's some version of, I want this company to be a customer of mine. Tell me exactly what to write in my lead generation message to these types of job titles so that they will want to buy from me. I imagine that's a relative stab at a prompt, right? And what generative AI is spitting out are these long, complex lead generation messages that focus hard on credibility. Because usually it'll spit back something. I've used ChatGPT, I will say, about 4 times, so I'm not not the world's expert on this, right? But usually it spits back something relatively simple in the first instance. Um, I will segue here and just point out that one of the times I used it was when we were looking at front doors. And I was like, "Do you think that we should use," I think it's like composite material or wood for our front door? And it spat out this very, very simple, "You should use composite material." And then obviously, because I'm me, I was like, "Well, why should I do that? Because I quite like the wood ones." And then it gave me something that's more complicated. Um, but I imagine that's kind of how it goes when people put in a prompt about what they should write in lead generation, and then they say, make me sound more credible, or give me more credibility, or make me sound more professional, or make it more formal or less formal, or whatever they want to do. But the problem is, it's just spitting out these things that are basically indecipherable. Because when we're talking about adding more credibility in, the generative AI is like, oh, okay, cool. Well, I'll just put in all your qualifications then. But your qualifications to somebody who isn't an expert in what you do mean absolutely nothing. They don't know what they're there for. They don't really, I mean, they can take it as a sign that hopefully you've got certificates that say you're qualified to do something, but they just don't know what the something is. And that's difficult because the something is the bit that you want them to buy. So lead generation has become this confusing and often long winded interaction between yourself and a decision maker. And that's a problem because, again, when we try and make it clever or sound like an expert, actually what we're doing is alienating the people that you want to reach. And again, it comes back to that idea of when people feel like they're in some way stupid for not immediately understanding what you're talking about because they don't have the same level of expertise as you do, they don't communicate back. They just don't know. And going back to the two salespeople that I was talking about earlier, one of the things that we were having a discussion about was the fact that they're selling solutions that are incredibly complex to people who will not understand or have the technical ability to even imagine how it will work. And so the most gifted salespeople are the ones who can take something that is so incredibly complex and make somebody who doesn't have that same level of technical expertise or capability understand why it's relevant to them. That is a gift. And if you can, I'd say it's a gift. It's a learned gift. It's a skill, obviously. But if you can do that, you can sell literally anything. And yet, unfortunately, the online business space has got us all kind of creating these weird and wonderful job titles and long-winded lead generation messages that rely heavily on buzzwords because that's what will, and I quote, bring all the people in, and it isn't. And that is really scuppering sales processes because instead of having a title that is clear and having lead generation messaging that is clear and easy to understand, people are complicating the issue far too much. And then the decision makers, they're just not even starting the sales process then. Because they're thinking, well, if it's that complicated to understand what you do in the first instance, I can't hire you. I can't have a call with you because I won't understand anything. And the third and final place that this shows up a lot is in what I would fondly determine as being elevator pitches, right? And elevator pitches have changed. Let's just take a second for that. Elevator pitches used to just be the things that you would say when you went to a networking event, and it was supposed to be like a 30-second overview of who you are and what you do. Now, because of technological advancements and the ways that we interact, elevator pitches have changed. They happen on LinkedIn in your DMs. They happen on LinkedIn in the comments section. They happen at networking events. They happen at conferences. They happen when, if you're like me, you're on the train talking to people on your way home from events. My point is, elevator pitches happen all the time. They just look a bit different now. Perhaps one of the biggest difference that I notice is that, like I say, it used to be this 30-second overview, snapshot of what you do. And instead, now it's like the elevator is going up 75 stories. It's a 3.5 minute explanation of all of the things that you can possibly do. And this is really difficult because what we've been taught, and again, I do blame this on the internet marketing world at large. It's not just because I think that the internet marketing world is a big pyramid scheme, but part of it. Um, the internet marketing world has taught us that we need this volume all the time. And the big difference between sales and marketing is that marketing activities are designed to produce always in any business, whether it's a big corporate or a small solo founded business. It's designed to produce a volume of leads, which means that they, in a marketing team or marketing efforts inside a solo founded entrepreneurial business, you're kind of using the phrases that are going to get, or that you hope will get everybody interested. You need that volume, right? And visibility. In sales, we're looking for specific interactions. We're looking for conversations about very specific things. There is no point in me going to an event and talking about every single aspect of sales psychology, sales enablement, sales performance training, consultative sales training, best practice process consulting. Like, there is no point in me going to a networking event and talking about all of that because people just tune out. They don't know what bit they're interested in. They're not even sure half the time what it means. That's not because they're failing. It's just because I'm the sales expert in the room. My job and your job when you deliver any kind of elevator pitch is to understand what is that person probably interested in and what do they probably understand about the topic. I talk about it a lot, but my godson is 5. Um, and hilarious, I will say. He started school last September, and one of his favourite things to do when he gets home from school is to pull an armchair in front of a bookcase, and he'll say, "Nobody else is allowed to talk to me. I've had a hard day," and and that just absolutely cracks me up. But one of the other things that he does is he tells people, what his mum does and what his dad does, and somebody asked him what I do. And he was like, Auntie Jess helps people make money. And isn't that the simplest thing you've ever heard? Out of the mouths of a, very intelligent 5-year-old who really likes dinosaurs and tractors and finding bugs. Again, I'm not, because I don't have children, I don't know whether those are hobbies that are relative to 5-year-olds, but I assume so. But he tells everyone, he's like, Auntie Jess helps people make money. That's her job. And it's interesting because I know that I could go and do a grown-up, simple grown-up version of that on LinkedIn, at networking events, at conferences, when I meet people on the train home, because I do give a grown-up and simple version of that. And it gives people that ability to have a conversation with you because they understand it. And I say to everybody, I'm like, oh yeah, I help sales teams generate more revenue. That's it. And the difficulty is, I don't just do that. So for anyone who's sat there thinking, yeah, well, Jess, it's easy for you because you just help people make money. I actually do quite a lot outside of that. I do a lot around objection handling, metrics management, sales enablement, overall sales performance techniques, sales mindset, like lots and lots of other things that are very, very intricate and, quite complex. It's not that I don't do all the things, it's that there is no point in saying all of the things to people who won't know what they are and won't be interested. And that's the same for you. You know, think about the difference between all of the things that you can do and the things that actually give people the ability to have a conversation with you, but give them the ability to ask questions without feeling dumb. And that's really where your messaging starts to get on point. That's it for today's conversation. And in the new episodes coming up, we've got some pieces on peer-led accountability, which is exciting. We've got some pieces on new forms of lead generation that will be exciting to watch in 2026 and how you can harness them. And of course, everything in between. I'll see you in the next episode.